People in the UAP field, I like to call it psionics, but people in my field, we just call it old-fashioned psychic abilities. So
30 years ago, my mother started one of the first successful psychic lines. Growing up in this eccentric industry, the unexplainable, the mystical, was my normal. I was raised to have an open mind, yet to still be wisely grounded in skepticism. I've met some amazing talents and been witness to true psychic phenomena. I'm on a mission to find the best psychics in the most spiritual locations in the world. Join me on my journey, a journey to enlightenment. I'm Erica Gabrielle, and I am the Psychic Hunter.
good morning, but I guess good night for you, right?
Yeah, it's getting that way. It sure is. Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna get right into it because I know it's nighttime for you and I don't want to keep you up or anything. But can you tell the audience a little bit about your background and what you do, what you're currently doing, your research? Just expand upon that a little bit. And also, if you could use layman terms for us normies, that would be great.
That's fine. Yeah. So layman's terms for my current research and background. So I've had a career as a research scientist. So I've also taught in TAFE University, science in high school at the moment as well, and been in and out of industry, consulting in oil and gas, a little bit of mining, and then fisheries and aquaculture as well. So, but I've been a lifetime experiencer of the phenomenon. So the last 5 years, it's really hit me pretty hard. So and I started researching it a lot 6 or 7 years ago. I started writing a novel series where part of that background research for that novel series set in deep sea mining was this plot to roll out reverse engineered UFO technology. So I was kind of researching that and developing this novel series, and then I just got into it all, and this whole world opened up. Um, all my memories of being an experiencer came back to me. So while I was researching that, I then started some field work and started recording orb phenomena as well. And then I got into writing my autobiography a couple of years ago, which came out. And then I used all the background research in my novel series, and I actually put that into another book, which is coming out soon, Forbidden
Hmm. I saw
Science
that.
as well. So the whole thing kind of snowballed, and then I started getting in contact or reaching out, or people were getting in touch from the UAP community and intelligence and defense and the military, and so I've got that whole circle sort of behind me now, to varying degrees of people that can be known, people that don't want to be known. So that's all sitting in the background as well. And you protect your sources. So there's that whole world's opened up now in the last 5 years. And so I'm at a stage now where I've got this, portfolio of research that has a number of different pathways or programs in it. And at the moment, I'm even building in my own metadata app because I've got so much information that I want to mine it for data as well. So
Wow.
that's how that unfolded, in and around my day job, as a lot of people are in this field, unless they're directly involved in military and intelligence. So that's how that sort of came out about. And in layman's terms, the crux of it really is about scalar fields. So in other words, longitudinal waves, like sound waves, are longitudinal waves, but what we've got with the electromagnetic spectrum and light waves is there's a lot of um, notice being taken now of scalar waves that are emitted along with electromagnetic waves. And that whole field of science is sort of, well, according to my research, taken offline and connected to coveted technology. And that my whole research focuses on finding the mathematical foundations for that through Maxwell's work, linking that to observation in the field, rediscovering the disparate science around all that and putting it all together and saying, well, here's a mechanics and reverse engineering model for how a craft might mimic those observations. So it's kind of evolved into all that. There's field work, autonomous phenomena. There's desktop research on modeling, image analysis, and quantum imaging, which is a really good tool for this. I'm looking at mechanics of the phenomenon. So that all fits together, and then I apply my background knowledge and all that to link how you might design craft to mimic the observables that we see. Because these are superluminal objects. They operate outside space and time, and how they do that, I think, is slowly being released to the public. We've got a legacy program there that's kept hold of this for a long, long time, and we've got public science, which is sorely lacking in that whole area and trying to catch up and understand what on earth has been going on. So I sit in that space, or I sit across that space, and it's really, I mean, it's not a full time job for me, but it's such a dynamic and really interesting space to be in. But you also have to be careful what you say, what you do, don't burn your relationships, and yeah, so it is treading carefully and doing things in the right way. Because a few decades ago, people like me would be shut down for looking at stuff like that,
Yeah.
because that's what's happened to other people. So that's where I'm at the moment.
hmm Now, so just to try to sort of help me wrap my mind around this and how this works. When you say scalar, I'm kind of thinking of like almost like a lattice, and so you're kind of like it's going from like one point in space time to another point in space time. Am I kind of understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it's this whole
hmm
lattice terminology around this. There's quite a few different terms that, from my research, all refer to the same thing.
Okay.
It's this four-dimensional space that's all around us that you can't see, but it's there like a lattice. Uh, it has a structure, it has a geometry. It can be folded, turned. You can link nodes in it across space and time with the right craft design, which is what I've been looking at as well. Yeah, so you're not really moving. You bypass Newtonian physics. You bypass the limitations of light because you're not moving through physical space. You're phasing through this four-dimensional lattice, and the mathematical foundation for that goes back to James Clerk Maxwell's quaternion notation, which they gauged to well, Heaviside gauged that to zero and took it out. But if you put it back in, you can have up to 50 different types of scalar waves emitted alongside EM waves. So that's in a four-dimensional. You have to start thinking in four dimensions or four-dimensional geometry to understand how you can hop, jump, or phase between points. So there's no direction. It's not a vector field. There's no direction. It's just the relative. It's the relative coordinates. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you have a pair of coordinates, you can hop between them.
Okay. But
So it's
and
like turning a Rubik's cube. So
right.
it's like turning a Rubik's cube around. So you're on this side of the galaxy, you find the exact opposite node on that side of the galaxy. They couple and then they flip, and all of a sudden you're in another part of the galaxy within minutes, not years, decades, or hundreds of years.
And it seems like scientists like you are also starting to come to the conclusion that well, I guess people in the UAP field they like to call it psionics, but people in my field we just call it old-fashioned psychic abilities. So, um there seems to be a correlation between traveling and consciousness, and could you expand on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, it was that term psionics. I mean, Ross Coulthart's talked a lot about that with Jake Barber, and people forget that that's two words: psychology and electronics. So started to do a little bit of work about interface technology between human consciousness and thought derived action with no physical contact or keyboard or anything. So what you think becomes action. So the term psionics is what is the electronic interface with consciousness that allows that to happen, and perhaps that's how these UAP operate, with or without an operator inside them. So that could be externally operated or an AI, but there's an interface there between conscious thought and a technology that allows your thought to be transferred to the craft and orientate itself in four-dimensional space to its arrival coordinates. That seems to be where that whole technology is out. Now, how that's done, again, should, I think, links back to scalar field technology and scalar waves, because it's not EM waves. So you need some sort of memory foam or memory structure around the craft that can pop up these nodes aligned with the scalar field based on your thought about where you want to be in that scalar field. And so it's like I'm thinking about, okay, I want to be, I want to be at Mars, and then there's a set of coordinates with nodes in them that link those, and your thought drives that orientation within the membrane around that craft, and then that aligns with this four-dimensional space, couples the two nodes, and then you arrive there. So it's bypassing all the traditional methods of keyboards and control rooms and control centers, and it becomes a thought-orientated process. So that's the term psionics. And like you said, some people have a natural ability to link consciously with the phenomenon more than others, and the more they do it, like myself, the more intuitive it becomes, and it almost becomes like a training regime. You might ask me later, where things get increasingly complex about overcoming the disorientation and fear of that whole process.
Hmm. Hmm. I kind of think of our soul in a way, our consciousness. If you think about it, like human bodies, like this is like the ultimate UFO. So, I mean, like, are we in this craft, if you will, this
Yeah,
meat suit to come here and experience Earth?
and so
And after we leave this craft, do we go to another craft? You know, it's I don't know. I think somehow it seems like there's some kind of link between all of this and also like the afterlife and the soul. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, there's a little bit, and Dolores Cannon did a lot of that work before she passed on and left this world. The two key points from that, which I can really relate to, is that you're not your body, and you are not the character you play on this earth, because you chose everything that you wanted to happen. So
This is
if you
like
can
an
start to
avatar.
yeah, if you can start to
Mhm.
understand that you're here to learn lessons and experience iterations of those lessons until you understand them, and then you come back and you come back and you come back, and then you graduate. So the Earth School, I think she called it. But
Mhm.
if you wake up to your consciousness as being not your body, right, then you start to wake up to the fact that everything is here around you in three-dimensional space is a construct or a reflection of the deception or misalignment between your eyes, your brain, and your consciousness. So we've produced this reality around us that's easily manipulated by people that know how all this works. And then and then they take over. Then you think that everything is real, okay, and that this is the way it's always been, but it hasn't, because it bypasses that whole cycle of understanding what consciousness is that the ancients had in antiquity, the resets on Earth, the fact the human race is probably a lot older than we are led to believe, and it becomes very easy to manipulate the public into forgetting about all the anomalies around the planet. And there's tons of them. There's heaps. There's thousands that don't add up to what society says reality is. So you start to wake up to all that. So and if you're soul driven and you start to connect with your higher self and your consciousness, and then we perceive that as our soul, then yes, uh, maybe we've come from other places to be here at a particular point in time. Some have always come. Some might be really old that have been here. Some have come from elsewhere, and you're in this form for to learn these lessons, or as Dolores Cannon said, a lot of us are here to help through this transition back to alignment with how we used to be, and out of this fear-based consumer society that has driven us to the brink in terms of the planet's health, and you can think of the planet as being conscious as well, and going through the throes of upheaval to realign. So yeah, I think there's that whole soul-based perspective is lost on secular society, usurped by organized religion, and the only people that really understand where all that comes from are First Nations people that are connected to spirit and to nature and to country. So yeah.
And don't you think that we're kind of limited by these cages that we're in because we only have, you know, uh, we 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 perceive that we have five senses, arguably a sixth sense. Um,
Mm.
just like a dog might see visually different, or an owl sees different than we do.
Mm. Yeah.
That we are not perceiving the whole actual reality that's around us because we're limited by only the five senses.
I think you've really got it spot on there because the human eye only sees 400 to 700 nanometers, the visual spectrum. So there's the near and far infrared, there's UV, ultraviolet, it's ultraviolet spectrum, so we're quite limited by the physical dimension, and we can't see what's around that in the rest of the EM spectrum as well. And then you've got your other senses. You're limited by your hearing range, your auditory range as well. So you can't pick up a lot of that. So yes, we have the five senses are quite well adapted to our physical environment, but it's an animal body, and like you said, there are animals that have much better senses than humans do. You can pick up on some of these things and sense some of these things, and even the phenomenon, and see things that we can't see and hear. So, like Jake Barber talks about the dog whistle connection with his work and attraction of the phenomenon. So if you start to understand that when you're walking around, that you have a very limited perception of what is actually around you in physical space, that your worldview starts to change.
Yeah. And can you talk about your early experiences as a child, and expand on that a little bit? And when was it that you realized that this doesn't wasn't like natural childhood imagination? And when
I
did you
used,
figure that out?
well, I always used to not talk about it to hardly anyone ever, and suppress it and put it behind me because I've always, since as long as I can remember, I remember my dreams, my visions, and my experiences. I may put them aside and they may come back to me because life gets in the way. Not normal, I would say. It was only going into the last sort of decade that I sort of, because you don't want to perceive yourself as crazy, but it's hard to have the confidence to be in the right community to speak up about these things. But I think in the last decade, 10, 15 years, I've been around a few more sort of spiritual people, talked about out of body, bilocation, precognition, astral travel, and dreamscapes. And so that's kind of, I said, oh, okay, there's other people like this out there. Uh, and then in the last 5 years, when that all came flooding back and all those memories of just how weird and wonderful my untold story has been, that's what prompted me to write about it. And then I got even more confidence when I see other high profile people coming out and talking about this part of their lives, like Gary Noll, Professor Gary Noll, and he's a big one about his
Mhm.
life, his time as an experiencer. And what seems to come out is a lot of these high profile people that are career scientists or have done some absolutely amazing things start to say, well, I kind of had help, or I was downloading things, or XYZ happened that was really weird and I didn't want to tell anyone. And they start to tell their story. And it's a little bit like me with my research, is that I haven't been alone doing it. I just seem to get visions, symbols, dreams, experiences that I have to decode. And then when I decode them, I go, oh, I've been trying to understand that for months. And then all of a sudden it makes sense. And then so you go and go forward again. So I think, yeah, it's an evolving process. But some people never wake up to that. I think they do say a lot of that is induced through trauma, because I've had trauma in my life for various reasons, like others, and that, and some make it through, and the process of waking up and connecting with consciousness comes from traumatic experiences. So they talk a lot about that as well.
So, how do you navigate that academic skepticism when you come across it, and how do you deal with that? How do you navigate that?
With skepticism, um, with confidence now, because I don't, I don't really have time for it. I think it's like a few others that I talk to, um, that I know well enough now that are in this field, is that the time for addressing that is gone because we've all moved on, and UFOs are real, UAPs are real. So the government's said that now. So it doesn't really matter what they're saying anymore. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, yes, you could say, "Oh, this is really frustrating," because they just like you're chasing bugs, or it's all camera artifacts, or people are just crazy and seeing stuff that's not there. But we're past all that now. So those skeptics on the couch, the first thing I would say now is, have you read any of my stuff, or is it just your opinion based on your experience? Like, where's your opinion come from as a couch skeptic? Are you an experiencer? Have you been reading on the subject? Have you read this book, this book, this book, and this book by these people? Have you looked at my work? Have you watched my YouTube channel? It's like, and most of the time the answer will be no. And it's like, okay, we'll see you later then. So and nowadays I don't even address them. I block them, don't return your messages. There's no time. We run out of time for all that. Like they'll be left where they are. It's,
I
it's
feel
moving
this.
at quite a
Yeah,
fast pace.
I feel the
Yeah.
same way because in my field, I grew up my mom started one of the first psychic companies in the United States, and I grew up with that, and we had to actually be careful about like who we told, what my mom does, uh, and we came across a lot of that, and I always tell people, it's not my job to convince you. You have to have an experience yourself, and until you have an experience for yourself, you won't understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the people connected to this field that aren't experiencers but are well informed, and understand all this. So and there's a movement now from skepticism, say within academia as well, starting to realize, hey, there's a science here we don't understand, and academia is struggling with it. We need to be more into the phenomenology of the phenomenon. So rather than siloed topics like the physics of UAP, that's not going to solve it, because you've got consciousness, you've got biology, you've got biomechanics. So you've got earth and space science. So a physicist is not going to have the answers. A biologist is not going to have the answers. Um, a psychologist by themselves doesn't have the answers, but all together they have the answer, because that's what the phenomenon is. It involves all the sciences and a technology, that it has a connection to spirituality and consciousness that we in the public domain haven't been kept up to date with, because it's been taken over through legacy programs and researched quite extensively, I would say, and thoroughly, since the 1930s, 1940s, within the private sector, intelligence and the military, because it's a useful thing to know if you have an adversary. So the whole problem we have at the moment is that the whole track went down the World War II, post World War II, Cold War era, where anything that was an advantage was kept secret. So you had to use over your adversary. But the trouble is, public science has stalled for 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. We're still finding ever more fanciful ways of putting people on giant petrol bombs and putting them up into low Earth orbit, and calling that progress. It isn't.
Right.
We've been doing the same thing, in more fanciful ways, for 80 years. So that's not really progress.
And is that really the title of your book that's coming out, Forbidden: A Science of Secrets? Is that kind of about what you're what you're talking
Yeah.
about is that it's a forbidden secret only for a few select people in the world. Uh,
Yeah, like, look, I
mhm.
gather the evidence for that. So I look at key characters historically that have come afoul of authorities from working in that space, and then I look at the pop culture around all that, the UFO pop culture. I look at counterintelligence and how and I look at the lack of vocabulary or terminology, which has facilitated all this confusion, which people have enjoyed that know the truth because it distracts us from what's really going on. Whether or not it involves ETs or it's human invention, we're talking about a combination of things here. Of the characters I research are inventors who went down that technology path themselves, whether they had some sort of interface with the phenomenon that facilitated that, who knows? But they tried to go down that path and they came afoul of authorities as well. And then we've got the mathematics that was erroneously sidelined through Maxwell and Heaviside as well. We've got torsion field scientists um, that are mostly Russian. Okay, because that's discouraging secular society, so that's all tied into it. There's a whole story around this whole science without even considering the phenomenon as well, and that's the key. And people aren't talking about it. Like when my book comes out, 90% of what's in there is not discussed anywhere publicly. I've seen a few people talk about some of the characters historically and start to get into it, but that's another whole story that I hope this book helps open up. That there is a legacy since World War II of people that have been involved in inventing this kind of scale of technology in terms of transportation vehicles that have quickly been taken offline and their careers ruined or changed because of it, and labs shut down, work confiscated.
That's intense. Yeah. I've heard you sort of reference uh, going back to ancient civilizations and how this could be linked. Are you kind of making a reference to the Anunnaki?
I was going. It's kind of broader than that because I spent a lot of time because I grew up Christian. But my dad was a priest, and so my life was, Christianity and the church till I was 16 or so. So, but a lot of there's a lot to be said for taking a closer look at the biblical narratives and origin stories and their roots in Akkadian and Sumerian tablets in terms of the Old Testament and how that permeates through the Bible. And Paul Anthony Wallace has done a lot of work in that area because there seems to be evidence that something's been going on that is non-human for a long, long time. And although most of that's sort of been edited out of various translations of the biblical narrative, it is there. And Paul spends a lot of time going back to the origin stories and the root stories of a lot of that. And then you go back into ancient civilizations as well and look at their narratives and both First Nations people and powerful empires like the Egyptians and the Persians, especially the Egyptians. And then you look at
There seems to be
pre-civilization, yeah,
Going back to
yeah,
Sumerians. Yeah.
Sumerian as well, and Gilgamesh and all
Yeah.
those and the evidence for that. And then you look at other people studying archaeology, and there's books coming out now that talk about misrepresentation of ancient artifacts and date lines and timelines that they may be a lot older than we're led to believe because everything has to fit the narratives, the public scientific narratives, which everyone is led to believe is true, and it has a linear progression. So, oh God, no, we can't have global resets. We can't have a highly advanced human race that existing 20,000 years ago because that doesn't fit the narrative. So where's all the evidence? Well, the evidence is there. It's buried. There's been catastrophes and global global events that have usurped and upturned all that. So that, I think, is a whole area that will start to, I think things are going to come together from different parts of science in terms of ancient history, archaeology, science and technology, spirituality and consciousness, to make us all wake up and realize that we're on a very old planet. It's been through a lot of research. A lot of people have come and gone, including humans and non-humans. And I keep saying to a few people nowadays that once publicly we get up there and out into the solar system, we're going to see a graveyard of artifacts because it's a very old solar system.
Like you, I grew up Catholic and I went to
Mm.
Catholic school. My father was very religious, but my mother was spiritual. She wasn't so much religious, more spiritual. But I remember in Catholic school, coming across some references, and I remember in Genesis, I think it's like chapter 6, it talks about the sons of God intermingling
Mm.
with the daughters of man.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember even thinking as a child, that's kind of weird, you know? And I remember bringing it to my mother, and my mom was like, that kind of sounds like aliens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there are these references in the Bible. Um, and so what is your theory behind that? And do you think that we are a possible genetic manipulation?
Yeah, and Paul's a great does some great work in that area about progenitor races and genetically modified races. I mean, humans have a common ancestor with primates, but that the misconception people have is that we evolved from primates. Well, we didn't. We've got a common ancestor. So there's not this progression. There's a common ancestor,
There does
and
seem to be that missing link still.
yeah, the cool story goes that they spliced genes to create Homo sapiens a couple of 100,000 years ago when there was a leap in the body, and I think it was the frontal cortex. There was this evolutionary leap that was impossible to have occurred naturally. So they talk about crossbreeding, but the if you peel back the layers of the biblical narrative, you start to see that perhaps there is a genetic story in there with the Garden of Eden and the sons of God, the daughters of men. But there's more than one progenitor race that seems to be involved in all this because you could go back to the Anunnaki, but then you've got other, you've got the Greys and supposedly the Greys and the Tall Whites and the Nordics, and so what they're trying to say is that this has been going on a long, long time. And back then, in terms of biblical narratives, when people wrote about this stuff, they don't have the terminology that we have now. They've got to write about what they see using the language and the symbology that they know that can express what they're seeing. And even there's a lot that's left out of the Bible as well, because when they put it together, they chose what would be in it to fit the narrative of the Holy Roman Empire and the rise of the
Well,
Roman Catholic
a
Church. So
a big
that,
one is the Book of
yeah,
Enoch.
yeah, the Book of Enoch's not in there. Now he sat down and wrote what he was told to write about what seems to be an extraterrestrial race that wanted to impart all this knowledge on him, and he went with them a few times. So there's that there. There's the Nephilim as well, the giants as well, right? So there's the giants, and people just need to look. It's all there because the Smithsonian Institute has been trying to secret away giant skeletons that they've recovered. The 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet tall. Back in the Native Americans in the United States, um, they talk about giants in their oral history, all right? And supposedly they've even recovered giant skeletons in the United States, so from mounds. So this is all suppressed knowledge to try and cover up the true story of our planet and our place on it as a human race. And the biblical narrative, if you take away trying to have a literal interpretation of that, uh, and look more at the symbolism and the origin stories and realize that it's been translated from another language. And then Paul goes into talking about the Hebrew, the origin language, and the removal of pluralism from that, so that we have a monotheistic God. So the whole point of the Bible is to separate you from God, so you go through a priesthood or an intermediary to reach heaven. And that's not what Jesus taught. See, and this is all usurping Jesus' message, because you go into the Book of Thomas, or other books like that talk about the fact that God is inside you. The saying is like, split a piece of wood and I am there, split a stone and I am there. So that you are God, everyone is God, everyone is Jesus, because the universe is inside all of us. So, but the way to control a population is to create separation. So you take Jesus' message, turn it into a religion, put doctrine around it, because the Roman Empire was falling apart. So to maintain control, you've got Constantine. I think it's Constantine. Yeah, looking at becoming a Christian. Okay, let's enforce Christianity on the population, call it the Holy Roman Empire, and regain control of the situation. Oh, we need a Bible, because people, and only a select few could read back then, so they just believe what you tell them. So you sit up there with a priesthood and say this is how it is, with God, and you take over. So I think that's that whole, then you suppress spirituality, you suppress consciousness, because it's about separation and fear, and the message is reinterpreted in terms of organized religion rather than the true Christianity or the Christian faith and Jesus' message. So I've come through that whole journey as well, because I was indoctrinated quite heavily into organized religion, through my dad and the priesthood, and going to church, and all that sort of stuff. But I questioned a lot, and I was an experiencer at the time, and I didn't talk about what was going on in my head, because to me, it's still angels and demons back then. It's amazing how programmed you become as to what this is. if you're in the if you're in certain situations, but once you step away from that, get back in touch with your spirituality, try and deprogram the fear in you about all this. And sure, there are some aspects of the phenomenon seemed, I would describe as not very nice, in terms of both the interaction with my body and my mind, and some places or situations I find myself in. But I found the more power I had over my fear-based response, the more that part of the phenomenon steps back and says, you shouldn't be able to do that. I mean, like, literally, I've had that said to me, or I've felt that, because you become aware enough when you're say when you're asleep but awake and you're somewhere else. You become conscious enough to be able to start to manipulate the situation you're in.
It's funny that you bring that up because I had a lot of uh, experiences as a child, very similar to you. As I got older, of course, when I was a child, it's scary, absolutely scary.
Mm.
You don't understand it,
No.
but as you get older, you start to put everything together. But I've also, I think, as I'm older, less things have sort of happened to me. But I kind of do this. I kind of just consciously put out there, like, look, anybody, entity, alien, anybody want to talk to me? You need to make an appointment. Be polite and make an appointment.
Just come in, yeah. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
just, just don't come in the middle of the night and like scare the crap out of me.
Ah, it's a bit
um,
like that.
so how do you feel that bringing up religion again, do you feel that I guess the higher ups that happen to be maybe super religious are also a part of not letting this information out because they feel like it's demons or something evil?
Yeah, there's because even in Congress, because some people are still heavily religious, and they're still saying we can't go there. They're all demons. And these are heavily indoctrinated, senators or senior clerics in religious circles, indoctrinated into a faith based approach to the phenomenon. But you've got the opposite of that, because you've got senior officials in the Vatican Observatory saying that we may not be alone in the world. and that if there are other intelligent races, that we're all children of God. Um, so there's and you've got the evangelical Pentecostal people in senior positions in, say the United States government or military intelligence, that have a very narrow-minded evangelical perception of the phenomenon without evidence. Even as an experiencer, they might be saying, "Oh, it's a negative experience, it's a demon," or there's just no intellect there. It's just an emotional response to something they don't understand based on a indoctrinated religious background. But you have to put that aside, because if you go to other parts of organized religion in the church, they're starting to come around and say, "Well, yes, this is how religion's been for a long, long time, and it's to protect you and all that sort of stuff." But they're starting to say, "Well, yes, maybe there is other life forms that are intelligent." The whole, I mean, it's a very difficult subject to get around. To how do you demonstrate to church-going Christians that you can still have your faith, but be part of the bigger cosmos and a populated universe? That's where we're at the moment. So you can still have the message of Jesus doesn't change, whether it's you here or you on a ship with a couple of other beings from a different civilization. You can still have your Christian faith. It's just that the way it's interpreted needs to mature from this separation and control regime, and this angels and demons narrative. I think that's a sign. I think that's a sign of an immature, uh, unascended mindset in a primitive race that thinks they're intelligent, and it's all ego driven. Uh, so it's just getting people to, I don't know how you do it, get out of that mindset. But then it may be a cover as well. It could be a deliberate ploy to stop. You just don't know, to stop people going down that path. But I think it's all going to happen anyway now. So
I think, I look at even Jesus himself as quite a psychic, a seer, an oracle, if you will. He's and there's many mediums, references to psychics and mediums. They're not called that in the Bible, but if you're communicating with a higher energy, that's exactly what that is. Um, Also, I'm thinking too that the people in the government that are super religious and they might be blocking some information coming out. I kind of feel like they're being manipulated too. They're actually not the ones that are probably in control, because the ones that are really, really in control, they know 100% the truth.
well,
So,
this
right,
level. There's
right. There's like a
compartmentalization
level.
level. Yeah,
Hmm.
because if at a lower level they're saying that, then the guys that really know are going, "That's great, just keep doing what you're doing
Yeah,
because it
keep
just
doing
keeps
it.
everyone from the truth." And they're none the wiser. But if you connect to insiders, and I've got a couple of people that are probably more on the inside than others, and so you know that there is something to this whole story, and there is evidence there. And I'm writing about it, I publish about it. I've got an empirical, research based drive to understand all this, both from all levels, consciousness studies, right down to the physics and mechanics of craft. So, and if these other people that are just basing their thought on an opinion or an experience that reflects their life and their perception of reality, that's they're already limited, because they're in their own worldview and their own bubble, and they won't step outside of it. What and if once you step outside of that and go, well, that's a construct. That is all programming. That is my human life programming that makes me perceive my reality like that. And then you say, well, what if none of it's true? What if it's just all indoctrinated to function within the construct around you and contribute to society? So it's like the Matrix. Okay, so what if you step away from that and you become aware, and then you walk around with a completely different mindset about all of this: religion, Christianity, science, technology, ancient history, global resets, everything changes. So the people high up that know this, that have been in this. I mean, we know about MK Ultra. We know about journalists that have been talked about secret government programs and whistleblowers and senior people. And that's what the problem we have at the moment is the reduction in interest in reading books and understanding information because everything is instant. You just walk around now with even youth. Have you read a book lately? No, I don't read books. It's like it's so easy to make people believe whatever you want now because they don't bother to look for the information and read. It's all third hand. Oh no, they said this and they said that. And so how do you know that's true? Oh, because it was on TikTok. Well, you haven't read a book. So a lot of these people you were talking about at that mid-tier level, if I went to them and said, here's 30 books on the phenomenon, have you read any of them? I can guarantee you nearly 100% that they will say, no, I haven't read any of them. And say, well, how do you know what on earth you're talking about then, other than being a religious zealot? That's where we're at.
Yeah. Well, on the flip side of that too, we're now in a time where it's extremely hard with the internet and all the information. It's almost impossible to suppress information now. Well, let's shift gears a little bit, and I wanted to talk about orbs
Ah, yes,
and
yeah,
your
yeah.
research into that phenomena. I was very interested when you were talking about the geography of where you were.
Mm.
I believe when you were photographing and studying the orbs, were you in sort of like a desert type area?
Yeah,
In
Western Australia and outback, surrounded by a national park and iron ore mines.
I thought that was really interesting because are you familiar with Sedona? Sedona,
Yeah,
Arizona? Okay.
yeah.
So there's a lot of activity there. My first pilot that I did for the show, I interviewed a energy worker, but she also studied geology. And
Mm,
so I talked to her about what is it about the geology of that area uh, that might encourage the phenomena. And she talked about, Sedona has this like red type earth, and it's
mm,
because there's so much iron in
yeah.
the earth. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of correlation there. There's a lot of iron and they have copper mines and it's also a very ancient geological area.
Mm.
Um, do you think that there's some kind of something to that? Because I noticed that you reference a lot of iron in the area that you were researching.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of work to do up in the Pilbara around all this in terms of its connection with the phenomena at a number of different levels. Even when we talk about orbs, the manifestation of orbs, and the range or different orbs I've seen up there, because you've got your naturally occurring piezoelectrically generated orbs from the pressure put on quartz crystals, which creates an electric current, and that can discharge and form an orb. I'm pretty sure I've seen those, but you've got the other orb mechanics which appear truly anomalous, and from our quantum imaging and our work analyzing them, have a structure. They will manifest and assemble and assemble themselves and actually have a physical structure up there, and um, I think there is a lot of that is to do with magnetic confinement up there because it's an area that's got high grade magnetite iron ore deposits at about
I was
70%.
gonna
So there's
ask
a
you
lot,
that if
yeah,
something has to do with like magnetism, you know.
yeah, there's a lot
Yeah.
of
Mhm.
so and that's why there's iron ore mines up there. And from what we were researching in terms of orientation and manifestation to our physical dimension, which is a vector field, that magnetic confinement helps because they generate their energy externally, and then it's driven internally, which enables them to demonstrate the observables that we see. It's like flicking in and out, disappearing and reappearing, right angle turns and all that, um, and phasing superluminally. So if you've got magnetic confinement in an area like that, it's much easier to orientate, I think, within that physical space when you come in than it is to say go where there's naturally occurring magnetite or magnetic anomalies, because that's like you see, that's a craton up there. It's one of the oldest parts of the planet, so it's full of iron ore, and thus the red dust. So you're creating an environment where it also may mask the presence of the phenomenon, because if there's naturally occurring magnetic anomalies, then it's potentially a good place to hide as well. And at the moment, I'm working with a couple of people up there because I'm being sent some footage of actual structured craft. We think so. We're seeing boundary layer effects that look like orbs, but under certain conditions in our image analysis and certain atmospheric conditions, there seems to be a structure around them that looks much more like a craft than just a small orb. So we're
Are they
analyzing it.
are they are they now are you saying, like, gigantic orbs, like
Yeah,
the
like big.
size of football field,
Yeah,
would you say? Something like
yeah. So
that?
it's, rather than orb, it's like rather than orb, what we're seeing is the energy system of the craft is what we're seeing. So it looks like it might be an orb, but when we do a further analysis, we seem to be able to pick up some sort of silhouette which is cloaked, because by default, when a craft uses this scale, what we call the scalar lattice technology, by default they're cloaked, because that's how it works with absorbing with gravitational lensing and absorbing light, is that they become cloaked or shimmer, and it's only when they drop out of that phasing that we see the whole structure. So we're just seeing the energetic part where it's harnessing the energy from the lattice of space itself, which drives the mechanics and the propulsion of the craft. But what we've found in looking at those structured technical documents they're doing is that the way that it works is the same as the mechanics of an orb, like a 1 meter orb that self assembles. There's the same membrane structure, there's the same index clocking or phase orientation around the outside, it's the same toroidal vortex going on, same magnetic field lines. So one seems to be an imitation of the other. And that implies to me that there's a whole science there that's been grabbed, um, and then that's helped with people to come across this in their own research historically, looking at such craft, and then they've gone, well, here's a phenomenon that's demonstrating what they're trying to research. The two seem to be connected. I will grab that guy in the public, and get rid of all his research because he's too close to what we're observing in the phenomenon. So I think the Pilbara seems to be a place where there's a whole range of different levels of the phenomenon going on, from simple orbs, and Aboriginal Australians call them Min Min lights as well.
What are they
Uh,
called?
the- Min Min
Min Min?
lights
Okay. Is that
connected
the
to
Aboriginal name for it?
the Australian Aboriginal, connected to the spirit or spirits, and then right from that up to structured craft, because I'm talking to Aboriginal elders now about their origin stories, a little bit like Native American Indians. And they said, no, no, we've through our culture over thousands of years, we've always had craft around, like actual craft. Oh, and
Mhm.
sometimes the land and beings walk out of them. I mean, this is literally this is just a conversation over a coffee, and then the elder says, "But it's just when we don't tell the community not allowed to talk about it. The only people allowed to talk about it are the elders that have the right to talk about it." So,
Okay.
and that
Mhm.
to them, it's nothing. Like, hey, let's
Mhm.
just see. Oh, no, we don't make too much of a big deal of it because it can take over your life and it can ruin your life. They're just there, and they've always been, and that's their attitude.
It's
And
old
it's like,
news for
well,
them.
yeah, and when it's like, yeah, but to us, that's kind of a we want to understand why they're there, what they're doing, where their craft comes from, and then to them, it's like, oh, we've been there 60,000 years, so we haven't really thought about it. So because they're not interested in the technology, um, they're just interested in the relationship they have with the land and country and with spirit. So completely different mindsets. And one's blasé says, no, they've always been there. Same in the Pilbara, Dreamtime stories in the Pilbara. When they tell you a Dreamtime story, you go, that sounds like an ET or a spacecraft or something. So it's yeah. So that's a very I've got a lot of field work I want to do up there, both in terms of orbs, with some better gear. So I want to get a much higher camera speed, hyperspectral camera, a short range radar, thermal, and frequency spectrogram analysis, and go up there. So, but it's all about funding, like to go, because I lived up there when I taught. So it was easy to get out in the field with some limited gear, and to make up with not having the high spec gear, I just had a rigorous methodology. And then when I got a colleague on board for image analysis this year to go back and look at some stuff in more detail, it just confirmed what I'd already written about, but to a much higher level of detail. And that's when people started sending me other footage from around the region up in the Pilbara of uh, odd-looking phenomenal lights, and then we started looking at it in more detail as perhaps that's more of a structured craft. So
When you capture video and you slow it down, are you able to see more detail or more?
no, it's more about speeding up.
Oh, speeding up.
What
Okay.
is what you want. The higher the frame rate, the better, because otherwise you're missing gaps.
I
Like
gotcha.
30,
Okay.
30 frames per second is okay if you've got good image analysis software, and quantum imaging, and you can do exploded diagrams and color reduction and waveform analysis without pixelating the image. But if you can go to 60, 120 frames per second, uh, um, some people go up to 1,000, but you start to get shorter time frames between these objects, because they move so fast at 30 frames per second. You can miss some key events, and they start to talk about camera blurring and artifacts of filming at a low frame rate. But you can compensate for that through good image analysis to debunk what you're doing. So that's why when skeptics ask me now about orbs and bugs and camera blurring and all that, I just ignore them or block them now, because I've done so much work with some very highly qualified people looking at my photometry and videography, to understand that what we're seeing is not that it is anomalous, and we know the difference.
And from reading your book, it seemed like you really went through with fine tooth comb and you took out anything that could be a bat or a bug. You know,
Yeah, we
you
spent
you
time
already
doing.
documented that. Yeah.
Yeah, at hundreds of frames and hours and hours of video footage, done methodically and repeated exactly the same pattern, exactly the same way every time. Identified uh, different organisms that were organisms, and compared them to anomalous, what we could thought or confirmed were anomalous objects. So we went through that whole process. So I have no interest in entertaining
Yeah.
skeptics anymore,
I don't
because
blame you.
they haven't read anything. They might have seen Ross Coulter's interview and seen an orb or on there and made that assumption, and it's like, but you haven't bothered to look at anything else. So
Yeah, at this point at this point, it's all noise as far as I'm
it is all
concerned.
noise,
It's
because
just
we're too
noise you
far
gotta
into it
ignore.
now.
Yeah,
And this, and in the last 6 months, with all the other technical documents we've put out on our NRGscapes ResearchGate page, that just corroborates and builds on that whole picture. We're so far down the track now that I just can't be bothered going back and addressing that, because
yeah,
we're just too far ahead.
yeah. Now, with all your research, have you been able to, is there a variety of different orbs and you've been able to categorize them or
Yeah.
okay.
Yep, there is. Yep. So we've got we've got 3 or 4 different types, but what we found is the actual orbs. There's these really small, tiny ones that seem to be inquisitive and will just dart in and amongst the terrain and trees. And we've got some larger ones that are more transient, that seem to just move through um, the terrain and the field of view. But what we've also found in looking at the mechanics of these things is that it's in one of my technical documents, but the elongated rods, we think, are actually just derivatives of orbs that have changed their structure in relation to the environment to achieve a different purpose, uh, to, 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 to do something different. So whether they're what we don't know is what they are, why they're, and what they're doing, um, in terms of being sentient, conscious, because they seem to react to the observer and the gear the observer's using too. So it seems to be sensitive to that, and will change direction around you, or with tracking them. Almost, I think they call it the trickster, like the trickster effect, the trickster. That they have some sort of awareness that they're being observed, like the observer effect.
I'm
So,
wondering kind
yeah.
of if they're almost like biological drones in a way.
Oh, this is one of the things we look at, and in my one of my 3 papers on actual science papers I wrote on this, is we suggest a number of different things as to what they are, whether it's a naturally occurring ecosystem component as yet not really discovered, a bioengineered life form, or um, a some sort of drone, mechanical drone that's operated collectively from somewhere else, like a larger craft, and they've been sent
Almost
out.
like their version of, like, what a television set would be for us in order for them to observe us or observe
Yeah, and they are
creatures on
able to,
Earth, yeah.
and they can self-assemble around a nucleated core. They can change their structure because they talk about some of these larger spacecrafts, external skin, being able to morph or change shape. And again, that goes back to what these orbs do. So
And it
everything
would
I see,
I'm sorry,
yeah,
it would be a safer way for them to observe us without having to worry about getting shot down.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And and in terms of technology, what they're talking about now is that the external, they don't understand how these craft work because they seem to be able to change their shape. But the whole point of the outer structure of this craft is so they can orientate itself in four-dimensional space. And you can't have a craft that's got all these edges and shapes and barriers and ups and downs all around it because you can't interact with the scaled field that way. It's got to be smooth, reasonably smooth spaced surfaces with some sort of porous membrane that can orientate itself outside of physical space. So that mirrors what we see in orbs and orb rod phenomena, and being able to change their shape uh, as they orientate to the environment. Internally, the structure stays the same. It seems you've got the layers, you've got the vortex, you've got the toroidal field, you've got the magnetic field lines, but around the outside, we've got now in quantum imaging and exploded imaging an indexed valve clocking that goes on. And this video on my YouTube channel. We've got some video of this. We've got red dots. We've managed with color reduction and enhancement using waveform analysis. You can see this going on. That the outside spins, and then there's these little like valve plots around it, right? And then from merging, they seem to connect to nodes in the lattice of space itself. So we've got all that mechanics that we've been looking at with orbs. So they seem to be a self-assembled structure, but what we don't know is, are they sentient? What are they doing? And where do they come from? Who's operating them? We have no idea.
So, did you get a chance to take a look at the 2 photos that I sent you, the
I
orbs
had
that
briefly
everything.
had a look. Yeah, I'm very cautious about those ones because I've got like mine is video footage and lots of frames and a couple of photos because they can just be dust on the lens, especially in a house at close up when you're in a house. Is it might be in the hallway, and if it's semi transparent, you've got to be really careful. That's just not a magnification effect from a lens effect from taking the photos. What you need is multiple frames of that same object or video footage to start to analyze its motion, its mechanics, and then start to look at its internal structure. So just by looking at it, I can't say yay or nay. It
Yeah.
looked, it was 50-50 to me. Is that a lens artifact, or is there an actual object that's manifested into our dimension in physical space in that room or that place?
Well, as
So
a
I can't.
photographer,
Yeah.
I so that was my original career. I was a photographer,
Mm.
and, I mean, I just can't I can't explain it, um, from my photography background, and the fact that uh I captured the same orb in, like, 2 different spaces in the house, like, within, like, probably 3 minutes, 2 minutes of each other. Um, and then when I look at the inside of it, there just seems to be some kind of structure, some kind of plasma or something. I can't
Yeah,
describe it.
that's
It
it.
almost
If you start to enhance
energy.
it, yeah, and make it bigger, and there's some steps you can do with color reduction um, and like Google Photos and that, you can start to have a look and check your settings on your camera. Again, it's a matter of if you develop the arrays, if you develop a regime, we can go back to the same place and do the same photos at time intervals and start to document this. Then you start to have evidence say, well, it can't be because it's been here on this date, this date, this date, this same time, same time, same time, same time. I've cleaned the camera every time. It can't just be the same.
Right.
Then you start to have some rigorous. Because what some people do is they throw photos up and ask and say, well, I can't make a decision on one photo. It looks interesting, but what I need is a documented evidence of repetition, same time, same place, same object, same
Right.
camera settings, and then you can start to say, okay, well, there's something to that. There's something to that, and then go from there. So I've always been careful about that because other people approach me too, and then send me something that's in the sky, and I sort of look at it for a bit and go, well, I don't know, it could just be a piece of plastic floating in the wind or something. Because
Well, and I imagine
yeah,
you have to be careful of that too
mm,
because, you want it to be a scientific process, and I totally
well, it only
understand that.
takes one bad rap and
Right.
you lose your credibility. It was like poor old Lou Elizondo in one of the briefings was sent that photo from a pilot of the giant disc going across the surface of the earth during a hearing and brought it up. Might have been Eric Davis was there, I can't remember. But within a couple of hours later, they debunked it as not a UFO, and
Yeah,
he'd said it
yeah.
was. And he just apologized and said, well, it was off the cuff. It had just been sent to me, and I didn't vet it properly. And so I just felt a bit sorry for him for that. So 'cause he got sort of shot down for saying that.
Yeah.
So
I understand.
you do have to be careful not to get too vested in saying, "Oh, that's a UFO, or that's a
Right.
UAP," and just stop yourself and go, "Yeah, but I can't be sure because I
They
don't
c
have enough evidence."
they all can't be UFOs and orbs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 90% of them aren't, like, or 95%. But if you're like me and you concentrate on that 5% and you know what isn't, and then people send you stuff and you confirm that what they send you is anomalous, and then other people start sending you the same films of the same objects. I'm talking about more than one person here sending me stuff of the same objects.
Right,
Then you can say, "Oh, this we have something here."
right.
So I've got a map of field work to do in the Pilbara, some triangulations to do with activity up there, and it's just getting funding to go up with the gear and actually and gather more um, empirical evidence to build on what we're doing as part of our field work. So there's components with the field work, like lab work. We've got the computer modeling. So there's various things.
Well, also too, with those photographs that I sent you, I was, you're using infrared. I obviously wasn't, I just happened to be using a regular digital camera, and why I was able to capture those, I don't know. So,
Yeah, no, that
yeah,
happens though because I've taken photos myself, or other people have sent me photos. So look, there's nothing there when I was looking, but I just happened to be taking this photo, and I'm dealing with another Indigenous person that sent me some photos. You have a look at these. I won't say anything, and it just photographing people, something going on in the background as an object. So it wasn't there, you couldn't see it, but it's there in the photo.
yeah.
And it seems to be something about the human eye versus the camera. The camera will see it, the human eye won't. And that's really common even without infrared.
Do you think that the camera is just so quick it can catch
Yeah,
it, and
I
we
think it's the
can't with our
shutter
eye?
speed, the way the camera works with the lens and how it photographs visible light compared to the human eye. So it picks up these things whereas the human eye doesn't.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was, you know, I didn't notice it in the photos right away, but it was probably about 6 months afterwards that I noticed them. And then my mother had just passed away, and so of course I'm like, oh my God, is that my mom? I have to wonder if there's some kind of correlation between again our souls and the phenomena and how spiritual communication, it just seems to be some sort of link there.
I think there is some sort of spiritual connection with consciousness and the phenomenon and passing over. I kind of have an intuitive feeling about that too, and that if you have an event like that, which in your life, that if you are quite a conscious or awake person, that you attract that phenomenon, maybe because there's an emotional connection or extrasensory perception about that, and that orbs and that those types of orbs are part of that. That's why I said there's more than one type of orb, and there seems to be some biomimicry going on as well with bioengineered, possibly bioengineered orbs. So I think there's a range of different ones, and the spiritual one, it's like the indigenous people with the Min rights talk about the same thing. They're people that have passed over, and they just out on country, and that's their form, the form they take if they choose to present themselves
Come visit.
as being able to be seen. So I think there's something to that too in terms of consciousness connection with orb-like phenomena and the spiritual side of it.
And I'm gonna ask you kind of like a personal question, but have you ever lost anybody close to you?
Yeah, yeah. Both my parents died 4 years and 6 years ago from disease. So that last 6 years, I've had to deal with all that too. So yeah, so they both passed away, and yeah, I had some
Have you had
when my
experiences?
yeah when my dad passed during the night, something weird happened to me, and my sister phoned early morning and said, "Oh, your dad's gone." I knew it was close to going, but I had a vision, and then I woke up with a song in my head and couldn't go back to sleep, and then my sister phoned about my dad having passed away. So, and that song was a song that I'd really liked and watched a lot of from a certain band, and it just woke me up over and over and over in my head. And the key chorus of that song is "I want to be next to you," and it was just in my head, and I couldn't go back to sleep. And then my sister texted, "Oh, dad just died." So, yeah, just things like that.
I think that they pick signs that they know you will for sure recognize,
Mm, yeah.
and that's my feeling about it.
I think
Yeah.
I think so, but yeah, you have to have an awareness. It's like nothing's coincidence, everything's a synchronicity, but a lot of people can't see that everything's connected. And when now if you see a feather on the ground, pick it up, sort of, and then you've got your angel numbers, and you just become aware of all the stuff going on around you, and you start to connect with it, and then you start waking up even more.
Well, I think, after my mom passed away, uh, I think it opened that spiritual window for me again, and I'm much more in tune. Um, and a couple years later, I believe I had shared with you in text messaging that I had actually had a UFO experience driving to my father's house alone on the highway. I saw what I first. My first reaction was, first of all, what the hell is that? But then my second reaction is I thought it was a blimp. And then I thought, is it a military
Mhm.
uh um some kind of military blimp from the base? But I was looking at it closer, and it was completely matte. There were no seams. It was
Mm,
about the size of a football field. It was massive.
yeah.
And I was driving down the highway and I'm thinking to myself, am I the only one seeing this? And I went
Yeah.
into kind of like, I'm knocking myself in the head because now, of course, I'm like, why didn't I pull over and take photos? But I think I was almost like in a kind of like a trance and I don't know if it felt more like, whatever I was seeing was saying, it's okay. Nothing to see here. just
Yeah,
keep,
that
just keep
happens though.
driving. Just keep
I've had
driving.
I saw a couple objects a couple of times, and um, in my last 5 years, and it's like I had my phone, I didn't take any photos, and I just watched it, and it's like it's
Right.
gone. But yeah, it was an object. It got nothing like
Yeah.
a craft you see now. It's the same thing. It seems to be that you're in the zone, and then it's gone. It's like, oh, oh, I didn't take any photos.
Right,
Yeah,
right, because 'cause you're
yeah,
almost in a state of shock.
yeah.
Um,
Or it's on purpose. Like, here you are. You're allowed to see this, but we've made it so that you won't even think to to do anything else. And they go,
right.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I almost
You,
felt like I was in a trance, and
mm,
I'm thinking to myself, "Were they doing that to me?"
yeah,
So,
I
I
think that's all
didn't pull
part of
over.
this. I think that's all part of the scalar field technology too, and psionics and mind manipulation. So I think there's a lot of that there too,
And
at
and there's
at that level of technology.
there's no way it was a military craft. My father was a ROMAD, and, he used to call for the Air Force, he used to call in the, the aircrafts. He was a radio operator from the
Oh
ground.
yeah.
So, I mean, I grew up I'm familiar with, all the, technology out there, at least that's, out there,
I mean,
to the public. Uh, it was definitely nothing, military.
mm,
At
yeah.
least that we know about. Um, so I even went home and I talked to my dad and I was like, are they flying anything out of the old base?" And he's like, "No, they haven't done anything out of there for years." And then
Um,
I put on the news that day because I thought, okay, if I saw it, surely somebody else saw it, and nothing. So clearly, I was the only one seeing it, and there were other people driving. Where I was driving, it wasn't crowded, but there was another highway that cross
mm,
sections that highway, I was just in shock that nobody else saw it. Um, and again, I didn't really even I didn't tell anybody really because who am I going to tell? Like what am I going to do? Like, and even in the field that
yeah.
I'm in, it's not like I'm already, involved with a psychic company, so it's not like I'm
Mm,
gonna damage my reputation or anything like that, but even for somebody with, like, me in my industry, if I would've said anything to anybody, they'd be like, "Oh, she's just trying to get attention for her company," or, like so, yeah, there is this part that you don't wanna share it with people because you don't want people to think that you're cuckoo, so
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's a bit like that.
and
Yeah,
I
and
think
thanks.
And that's a part of what, is helping keeping everything secret because
Yeah,
of that,
I think so.
people don't wanna be labeled.
No, and to be honest, 95% of the people around me in everyday life are still at the stage of flying discs and little green men. So it's
Yeah.
just got absolutely no idea to the extent to which things are going on now. And I said, "What have you been listening to the U.S. Senate hearings on all this?" It's like, "What are you talking about?" So they got no idea. It's
No,
not. It's just not in their will or their
i
reality.
it's crazy when I talk about it with people too, they look at you and I'm like, "Well, the government's pretty much admitting it, like, it's the
Yeah,
Congress is talking
that's right.
about it," and they're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, really?" And I'm just like, "Where
yeah,
have you been?"
yeah, yeah.
But you won't find it on mainstream media, you really won't.
Nah, it's only
Yeah.
just that's creeping in a few little places, just very briefly, ad hoc or flippantly, but and not to the level that like Ross is doing with what they're doing. News Nation. There's been a little bit of Sky News, Seven News Spotlight, but only to the extent that that they can go with the public without them just being ridiculed.
So what do you if you're successful with, uh, researching this technology, how do you feel it's gonna change our culture and our resources? We won't need to rely on gas or electricity,
Yeah,
or
well,
how does it change everything? And do
this
you
is the
think that's a
thing.
part of the secret and why they're covering it up? Because it'll
Yeah,
put a lot
yeah,
of people
'cause,
out of business.
yeah. Well, it's interesting times now 'cause I feel a lot of it's already been done. Whether or not specifically the way I'm proposing that it's already been done and well developed, I may have some unique angles or aspects on that in terms of intellectual property, but the concepts might be the same. But in terms of impact, things are changing because if you can bring this out into the public without compromising aspects of the technology, which is what we want. We want to know that we're not alone, that there are other races that have all this technology. Like I said to a few people on other podcasts, I want to be able to hop on a shuttle and take a weekend on Mars at a hotel and come back again. I want to get there in 10 minutes. You can keep the technology, and I want to meet, Henry from Alpha Centauri, or, I don't care. It's like, just get on with it. um, we're ready for all this. You can keep the technology, but there's all the BS needs to stop, and we just need to bring it all out, move forward together. Don't point fingers. Have a lessons learned and truth telling. We're not interested in putting people into jail over historical circumstances. So, like, here's the level playing field. Here's amnesty. Just say it. You can keep the technology. Yeah, I may. Everyone has a business, so I think we're still going to have fossil fuels at a certain level, because they're involved in other things. Like, all plastics come from fossil fuels, from oil, let alone combustion engines. There's going to be levels, even out in the solar system. I think you're going to have levels of utilization of different technologies depending on where you're going to go and what you're going to do. That's the economics of energy transition as well. Is you can't just dump things. Entire economies are built on all of this. But we're at a stage now where, if it's, I think hedge funds, I would place a bet that hedge funds are already positioned for this and what's going to happen. And the same with oil companies and mineral companies. Is if I were a smart man on the executive board and I was looking at all this going, oh, I think there's something to all this. We'd better invest wisely. So not divest, invest wisely in a diverse portfolio, to counterbalance the change in narrative, whether or not they always knew. So and that's why people like me, you got to be smart about what you say, because it isn't just about free energy. It's about a stable economic transition, and into what we want, which is the truth, without crashing economies and causing chaos and confusion. So we can have the four races of ETs, we can have the orbs, we can have the technology, we can still have a place for the fossil fuel industry to the level required, but it's all got to work together. Otherwise, we just end up in chaos and destruction. And because we've got to do a lot of hand holding too, because the whole process now is education. It is one of education, because the majority of the people still have no idea how all this works. So when it all does come out slowly into the open, and you suddenly see a huge, great big football-sized craft sitting up in the sky, um, you got to say, the likes of you, me, you got to say, no, it's all right. This is always going to happen. It's just them or it's us, and so we're not going, "Ah, so we're all gonna die." It's like,
Yeah.
and the religious people are gonna pray or kill themselves or whatever. So it's a matter of enough of the population being ready, which I think what a lot of this is all about, psychologically prepared through interaction with the phenomenon and certain people in the industry and military, and that there's enough handholders around to help all this transition through in a reasonable, economically sustainable way.
Do you think that that's why they're not coming down and just, landing in the White House lawn and just saying, "Hey, we're here"? Like,
Yeah,
do you
but
think they're afraid of
I
affecting us
don't.
psychologically or
Well, no, I think it's more that if you read enough about all this, that there were already historical agreements in place with some of these species about what they can can't do, and deals were made. That
Okay.
seems to be the narrative that's in some of the books I've read, and what some of these whistleblowers are talking about with ex-presidents and corporations, and deals were done about their presidents, and what can and can't be done, but in exchange for technology. So, which was probably the wrong way to go, because that technology gets weaponized because it's outside of public control. But I think that's, if we can transition back to being involved as members of the public, that's the best way forward. Because the only if we don't go that way, all that's going to happen is more and more weaponization of this technology, being shut out of it. Then all of a sudden we're at war with a bunch of aliens,
Yeah,
because the wrong people are in charge,
exactly.
which is what we don't want.
Right, right. That's a scary thought. I just wanted to ask you real quickly, um, do you feel, I don't know about you, but as I sleep and I wake up and I'm in between that state of sleep and waking up, that's when I've been able to see orbs, like a ball of fireflies.
Mm.
Have
Yep.
you had the same experience? Do you think that there's something between that in between
Yeah.
state as you're waking up? And have you had
Yeah.
your own personal experiences?
Yeah, it's your most open state, and I've had that a lot. And not only orgs, I've had figures in my room interacting with them in a semi-lucid state, and because I got better and better at doing that and starting to control or maintain myself in those situations, actually interact. So I've had from orgs to actually figures, because I haven't been scared of them anymore, and it's actually started to ask, and different types of figures too in that state. So yeah, that's when it sort of happens. It's that state where you're not quite awake, but you're not asleep either. But I've also found I'm seem to be able to go into consciously choose to make these things happen more now. There's a certain way I have my when I when I'm going to sleep, I have this certain. It's hard to explain.
Like a
It's like a
meditation?
like a meditation, but I can see with my eyes closed. I can see a shape there. And then I've now started to associate that shape with experience of the phenomenon, and saying, oh, that must be an entry point. There's something to do with geometry in all of this, and geometry in connection with consciousness and becoming aware of it, will facilitates entering into whatever it is, and then it
Yeah.
comes in whatever form it comes in. Yeah, so no, I agree with that.
All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. And thank you so much for letting me pick your
Yeah,
brain for a little bit. I was really
that's a
excited to
pleasure.
get to talk to you with somebody with your background. It's been great. So,
Thank you
um,
very much.
sweet dreams. And
Yes.
let me know if anything happens tonight.
Certainly will. Yeah, all the best.
All right. Take care.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Yeah,
much.
you too.